So I was playing a little bit of Genshin Impact recently, and as I was evaporating away my daily resin, I started to wonder, this continent of Teyvat, with the different nations in it, what's the size of it actually? Because somehow that's an important question that needs to be answered. Should be easier, right? Wait till you have a daily mission in Liyue Harbor, place yourself down in Mondstadt, have a look across the map, and there we go, about 3 kilometers. Video over, right? Not so fast though. Now if the question just was how large the playable map is, well then there was probably a more elegant way of figuring that one out than eyeballing it off of quest markers. But I guess it's somewhere like, what, inside of a 5 by 5 kilometer square? Just about. But I think a better question would be, what is the size of Teyvat in the lore? We are told it is a continent, right? But yet these two capitals of nations, at least that's what they seem to be, now are separated by just a few kilometers? Maybe 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers on the road? That seems a little short. That's sort of like the separation between neighboring towns. Less countries. No, I think it's pretty obvious that in the game the distances need to be reduced, right? Imagine the devs had to model hundreds or thousands of kilometers of handcrafted terrain. They still wouldn't be done next century, and maybe Cyberpunk would even be finished and in working order. So clearly, in order to not have a 2 terabyte download for your phone, everything needs to be compressed a little. Still leaves the question, how large is Teyvat actually in the lore then? So now we have a direct line of sight between Mondstadt and Liyue, right? But that isn't enough. I was started to wonder what the path distance was, if someone were to actually travel. So I decided to do a practical test. At a bright and early 5:59 in the morning, I took everybody's favorite flamboyant Favonian friend and started to jog his icy ass across Teyvat. We're just starting right next to the Mondstadt gate, going for a little morning stroll, passing the bridge, coming up onto me and his pigeons, which will be spared for today, and I'm not actually going to put you through all of this. We're just going to initiate a little time-lapse, speed this along, and start jogging. I decided that, sort of to get a decent measurement, I was not going to sprint at all, and not teleport, and follow the path like a boring regular NPC would, and I don't know why I did that to myself. It's awful. I would not recommend it. I'm never going to do it again. That was tedious and not fun. And would you look at that, there's a couple hilly chills, and we're kind of level 1, and I just remembered that, and that's not great, but we don't have to worry because you can just kind of jog away from hilly chills. Yeah, that's about how dangerous the enemies are in this game. You just jog away from them. There's a couple of those anemia slimes coming up, and unfortunately, a strong gust of wind right now would quite literally kill our Kaeya? Ice dude, would literally kill him right now, so I just kind of zigzag those slimes, and we're still alive, and we're still going strong, and we've entered the country of Liyue right about now, and I'm still regretting doing this. This is about the point where it started to get a little boring, so speeding up and speeding up. So the question is basically, what's the path distance from the Mondstadt gate to the Liyue Harbor gate, right? And so in order to figure that out, I'm just running along with the Kaeya, and then later on I'll see how long that took and figure out the speed at which he travels. I mean, the other alternative would have been to kind of crudely approximate it on the map by, putting lines on it with a distance measurement, which, now that I think about it, I'm not sure which one's worse, to be perfectly honest. So yes, so we're just taking a stroll through the countryside with our level 1 Kaeya. Nothing could go wrong. I mean, he's level 1 and we're in world level 6 and all the enemies are level 60, but everything is fine. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Throwing nuisance, but I'm zigzagging and I'm dodging all the projectiles, and it's all going well, and nothing went wrong. Absolutely nothing. And that's nearly the end of our journey. Just final stretch. Kaeya is remarkably fit. Like, look at that. Real marathon runner over here. He's still going. And there we go. Taking the time. And that's about how long it took. Since we started jogging at about 9:59 in-game morning and arrived now at 21:03, it took an entire 15 hours and 4 minutes of continuous jogging to get from the Mondstadt gate to the Liyue Harbor gate, or about 15 minutes IRL. I also did a couple of the tests where I waited 8 minutes and 6 minutes 13 respectively, and each time 8 hours had passed in game and 6 hours had passed in game, so I think we can safely conclude that 1 second IRL equals 1 minute in the game. Now the question that still needs to be answered is how fast our knight captain actually is while running, so I took our little blue guinea pig and had him do a little 100 meters. So I carefully went through the video of Kaeya running, and it seems to me that he reaches the 50 meter mark 10 seconds after having passed the 100 meter mark, and is at the monolith about 9 seconds later. So I just averaged that out and said that he needs 9.5 seconds to cross 50 meters, which puts him at a speed of 5.26 meters per second, or 19 kilometers per hour, which would be about 11.8 miles per hour if, you're barbaric like that. Which, to put that in perspective, is a bit faster than the average marathon runner. That is very respectable for not even sprinting or dashing or hopping or anything. So the characters in this game are no slouches. Still doesn't explain why they drown after swimming for 10 meters. So now we finally have a time taken, and a speed with which Kaeya runs across the landscape. So finally it seems that the distance by road from the Mondstadt city gate to the Liyue city gate is about 4.5 kilometers. 4.5 to 5 kilometers, leaving room for some errors, which might have happened due to incidents which definitely totally did not occur at all during the time lapse, which I am not doing again. Now, a distance of 4.5 kilometers to be separating two supposed nations, which have had history in people for hundreds and thousands of years, well, that seems a little short, doesn't it? That's less the separation between the capital of two nations and more the separation between two tiny towns. So that seems a little silly, doesn't it? So I wondered, perhaps since everything in this game is running 60 times faster already, perhaps all the distances have been shrunk down by the same factor. So everything in lore is 60 times as large. Or rather, all the distances are 60 times as large. I don't think the Mondstadt Cathedral is 60 times as large. That would be silly. So that would mean that there's about 270 kilometers between Liyue and Mondstadt, which seems reasonable enough. I mean, I guess the continent of Teyvat is more like UK or Ireland-sized at that point, which is a little small for a continent, but more reasonable. So I thought I had cracked this case wide open until the rarest occurrence of all happened, and the protagonist ruined this theory by speaking.
Teyvat's day and night both seem particularly short. The skies here are full of stars, but they aren't the same as the ones seen from my home.
So, assuming that Ether and Lemine come from sort of an Earth-like world, if not Earth itself, that sort of implies that the day in Teyvat takes less than 24 hours, which would mean that the factor of times 60 wouldn't be accurate anymore. Maybe we need to knock off half of that, make it a factor of times 30, somewhere thereabouts. So the distance could actually be less than that, it could be about 100 kilometers. If we still insist to scale everything the same way that the time seems to scale. Now that doesn't mean that the world in the lore isn't significantly larger than the world in the game. As a matter of fact, the lore essentially states so outright. Back at the Guili Plains, we find the remains of the ancient Guili assembly, and there is a quest line, Treasure Lost, Treasure Found, during which we get a little clues that are found on tablets of stone. In the beginning, when the people assembled to farm the land, a god named Kaeya descended, whose dominion was over dust, and whose reach shrouded the skies for thousands of miles around. It says, which thousands of miles, that seems a bit much. Maybe it's many miles, I don't know how well translated it is. But thousands of miles clearly indicates a very large range. You can cover continental Europe with that, essentially. So. And then it goes on to say that she brought her people to the north of Mount Tianheng and taught them to tend the soil. Agriculture became their livelihood, and all prospered from it. The farming towns stretched for miles, and it was said that one could walk all the way to Stone Gate without ever leaving the network of pathways between the fields. So that means that, essentially, there needs to be enough room between north of Mount Tianheng, which is roughly where Liyue Harbor is located, up to the Stone Gate. But from the whole Kaeya and running and time-lapse debacle, we already know that there's hardly about 2 to 3 miles at most of distance between the two, so there just is no space in between up to the Stone Gate where you could actually cram miles of farmland. So the lore basically confirms that the world is larger. Now at this point you could go crazy with sustainable population minimums and look at the different amount of hectares that are needed to feed a certain amount of people. We know that the Guili Plains were home, the Guili Assembly was home to the peoples of 2 different deities, the Lord of Geo and the Goddess of Dust, so we can kind of make an estimate that there had to have been at least 10,000 people, so they're sustainable and that no genetical issues arise later on. And then you can look at different studies in the yields of crops, look at how many calories you get out of rice. But who would do that? That's insane. Now, hypothetically speaking, if somebody had done that, they might find that if rice was planted at absolutely unreasonable industrial efficiency, about 10,000 people might be able to be fed on sort of an area of 12 square kilometers, so that would be a square with a side length of 3.5 kilometers on each side. And maybe if they were living a little more prosperous, with a bit of hunting and meat in their diet, maybe it would be more like 50 square kilometers, so it would be like a square with a side length of 7 kilometers, which is already larger than the entire map. But that point is really overthinking it a little. So until better evidence for better estimates comes out, I'd like to suggest that in the lore, Mondstadt and Liyue are separated by about 100 to 285 kilometers, or 62 to 177 miles. But you could say that that's just a theory, a Teyvat theory.